Hello. I wanted to get on here today. I'm really excited. I just bought yet another grief book. You know what? I lost count of how many grief books that I have. I think I've shown you before. I have an entire shelf. I have an entire bookcase full of nothing but grief related materials, grief related books mostly. And so I just added another one, which I actually added on my Kindle. So I can't show you a physical copy of it. But the name of the book is the Handbook of Grief Therapies. It just came out in January of this year. So it's like almost brand spanking new. And it was edited by Edith Steffen, Evgenia or Jane Milman, and Bob Neimeyer. And it is awesome. And here's the piece that I really, really wanted to come on and share with you. It's in chapter 3. There's many, many chapters. What I love about most of the books that are edited by Robert Neimeyer is that the chapters are usually small, so I can get a whole bunch of information in small chunks. So this chapter in particular is chapter 3, and it's called The Effectiveness of Grief Therapy. And in it, it's a meta-analytic perspective. And the part that got me, that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to share this with all of you, is a section that's called A Definitional Beginning. And so it's defining the difference between grief support, grief counseling, and grief therapy. And this is really is one of the best definitions. So I'm going to read it to you because legally I don't want to cut and paste their materials into a post. And I really, really recommend go get this. Go buy this book. It's totally worth it. It is $36, $37, whether you buy it by Kindle or paperback. Hardcover's a little on the pricey side, about $95. So, but grief support. And by the way, I can't see you guys. Anybody who has joined me. So when you see this, just put in replay, hi, and if you are on while I'm talking, go ahead and post any questions or comments, because I can't see who is posting as well. Anyway, so grief support, and I'm verbatim reading from this section. Grief support can be of an informal sort, as provided by friends, or of a more formal kind, as offered by trained or untrained volunteers, as in mutual support groups, for example, widowed people outreach services, or internet chat groups for specialized communities of mourners. At times, of course, professionals can offer supportive interventions that don't require specialized training implied in the next two categories. So we can offer grief support and not get that extra training. But I really, absolutely, probably no surprise to any of you watching this, is I am totally an advocate of go get grief training. And there's so many different trainings. I know people have asked me, what would you recommend? I have done many courses with the Portland Loss and Transition Institute, and or the Portland Institute of Loss and Transition, and I totally support and recommend you getting some training there. And they offer certification as well, which is a very supportive environment. So anyway, so if you're going to go get some training, and there's a whole bunch of other places as well. in the next couple of weeks, I'll be bringing you some more information about other programs too. So grief counseling as opposed to grief support. Grief counseling, and I'm reading verbatim from the book, the Handbook of Grief Therapies. Grief counseling, as we use the term, refers to professional care for the bereaved, commonly featuring, my favorite, psychoeducation, reinforcement of self-care, and loss-related coping skills, usually provided to the family members of a patient at the end of life and to the bereaved in a shorter term aftermath of a loss, often irrespective of a clinical assessment of their functioning. So grief counseling can be offered, again, without the assessment. That's just my side note. Not uncommonly, when provided early in bereavement, it does have the goal of mitigating subsequent complications in grieving, and in such cases can be considered a form of preventative intervention. Now, next section. By contrast, grief therapy is provided by mental health professionals, drawing on sophisticated and specialized skills and competencies. Although therapy can be offered to any bereaved persons, irrespective of their clinical presentation, it is especially relevant to people experiencing elevated and often protracted grief symptomatology, and encompasses psychotherapies designed specifically to reduce suffering and promote restoration. So formal professional intervention of this kind can be offered to at-risk clients or families in anticipation of a loss, as in palliative care settings, or in the longer-term aftermath of the death, frequently in response to prolonged and functionally impairing responses to loss. So those are those three categories. I just think I really advocate go get the Handbook of Grief Therapies. It is all really current information, but I really, really love those three categories. We can offer grief support, and then there's grief counseling, and then we have to take a look at those cases of people who are requiring more grief therapy. I often think about, this is my own opinion, I often think about cases of prolonged grief, what we used to call complicated grief, which I think is actually a better title, but a better name for it. That's my opinion. And those cases usually are related to sudden loss, sudden death, violent death, stigmatized loss, such as suicide loss, overdose loss, and so death of a child. And so people can be helped with grief support or grief counseling, but grief therapy really is about people who are really, really having a hard time and are really, really struggling. So go get the book and think about these definitions. How would you define grief support, grief counseling, and grief therapy? And thanks for joining me.